people from the international community, former students of the American College, former students like me of Professor R. Nedumaran. Welcome you all. There are two people in my life who have greatly influenced my teaching. The first person I would say is a person called Lodemaster, who taught me at Rudolf Steiner School in Belgium. And the second person I would say is none other than Professor Nedumaran. So I am really happy to share from the Grandmaster what I have learned. And I hope each one of you in this community will enjoy his lecture. Now, I earnestly welcome Mr. Chamit, the third-year representative, to welcome Professor R. Nedumaran.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. I'm a student of the Department of Languages and Communication Studies, Trincomalee Campus, Eastern University of Sri Lanka. It's my great pleasure and honor to introduce someone truly extraordinary, Professor Aren. He's a man of many talents and achievements, someone who has excelled in teaching, public speaking, corporate training, and even acting. Professor Aren has had an incredible teaching career spanning over 5 decades. He has taught at some of the most prestigious institutions and universities, including the American College in Madurai, where he was the professor and head of the English department, and Kodaikanal Christian College, where he served as vice principal and head of the Department of English. He has inspired generations of students with his love for poetry, literature, and education. But his work didn't stop at teaching in classrooms. Professor Aren has shared his expertise globally, teaching at top universities in the United States, including the Thiel College, Oberlin College, and the University of Pennsylvania. He has represented India on international platforms and made a mark as a brilliant scholar and cultural ambassador. What makes him even more special is his ability to inspire people through his words. He is a gifted public speaker, known for his motivational talks in both Tamil and English languages. Whether speaking to students or professions, his speeches leave a lasting impact. As a trainer in soft skills, personal development, and leadership, Professor Aren has worked with leading companies like Tata Consultancy Service, HCL Technologies, and Britannia Indian Limited. His workshop help people communicate better, lead with confidence, and grow in their personal and professional lives. And here's something unique. Professor Aren is also a film actor and a stage performer. Not only that, he has also performed in popular plays like You Never Can Tell an Arms and Man, showcased in his incredible talents as an actor.
Sure.
Throughout his career, he has been recognized for his contributions to education, culture, and the arts. He has spoken at international conferences and institutions, sharing his knowledge of Indian literature, culture, and heritage. His commitment to empowering others through learning and creativity has made him a role model for many. My dear friends, Professor R.N. is a truly remarkable person. His life shows us how passion, hard work, and dedication can make a huge impact on our lives. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished guest, Professor R.N., with our heartfelt gratitudes. And I would like to welcome the senior lecturer, Dr. J.S. Rohan Savarimuthu, the senior lecturer of the Department of Languages and Communication Studies of Trincomalee campus, to this lecturer. And I would like to welcome all of the participants for this lecturer. Please join me, and the floor is open to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall I go ahead?
Yes, sir.
Everything okay? My sound?
Everything is crystal clear.
Okay, very
Everything
good.
is okay.
Thank you very much for all the words of welcome. Happy to learn the Belgium-Madurai connection. And the student representative should not have taken such a long time introducing me, right? But very generous of him. The first thing that struck me when I was requested to talk about Eliot, how can the undergraduates cope with a tough cookie like Eliot? I don't think I would have done that as an undergraduate, because the first time I taught Eliot was like 81, 82, and I found it extremely, extremely difficult. I must say I did cut a very sorry figure. Let's say for the first 3 years into teaching of Eliot. I think by the time Rowan came into my vision, I think I had recovered sufficiently from the Eliot phobia. Okay, without much ado, let's go to the topic. Poetry as an act of daring. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Let me go to the first slide.
Please mute your mics.
So what you see on the slide is a two-line poem from In a Station of the Metro by the great Imagist poet Ezra Pound, kind of the guru, the motivator, the coordinator, whatever terms you want. That's a kind of relationship that existed between Pound and Eliot. So I wanted to find a signpost. It's like I need some guidance to understand an impossible poem like the love song. So I went to In a Station of the Metro by Ezra Pound. Look at the two lines. The apparition of these faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black bough. Actually, after the word crowd, there should have been a semicolon. So there is we got to make that connection between the two lines. Where does this take place? In a station of the metro. I guess in Paris, in a rail station. We will describe a rail station as, as a very busy beehive of hundreds of people getting in and getting out. And you want to see that, you can go to a metro station like in Chennai or in Mumbai. Hundreds of faces. But then Ezra Pound uses the word apparition. It has got the implications of ghostliness. So I asked myself the question, he could have used the word appearance. But I guess apparition is a loaded word. So the poet is trying to convey something more than the literal meaning of these faces in the crowd. Yes, I make the connection. It happens in a station, a metro rail station. And the second line is totally unconnected. Disjuncture, petals on a wet black bough. Bough is a branch. So you have petals, a rainy evening perhaps, wet black, plastered to the branch. So the reader has to make the connections, the ghostly, maybe the ghastly presence of thousands of hundreds of faces, faceless, nameless crowd. And the petals plastered, stuck on the branch. The Pound says, you can make the connections whichever way you want. Maybe you think that the crowd in the rail station is not normal. There is something weird about these faces. There is nothing individualistic about it. It's just one vast image. He calls it as apparition. And they don't seem to have any meaning, their lives. They seem to be moving in and moving out, like ghosts. Well, that's a kind of meaning you and I could conjure and compare it with petals on a wet black bough. Nothing human about the petals, but stuck, plastered on the branch. So it's a typical imagist poems. You have the image of petals, the image of a branch, and the image of a rail station. So it elicits from us a certain intellectual or emotional responses. It happens in a second, in an instant of time. So the image should create that kind of response in the reader. And the response differs from person to person. And I want to stress the fact that we have to move away from a traditional interpretation of a poem. We always ask questions in the exams, elucidate, explain, compare, where the student responds with a summary of the poem. But here we are talking about what's my reaction to these two lines. And the reactions are many, different. It all depends upon how the reader captures that moment. How does it affect him emotionally? What kind of thoughts that evoke in the reader? Now, if you have that kind of approach, you need to have that kind of approach when you go to a poem like The Wasteland or the love song of Alfred Prufrock. So this is a signpost. The point is, we have to respond to this juncture. We have to respond to the unusual conditions that you find on the poem, the structure, the images, the rhyme scheme, the irregular lines, and so on. The poet is trying to convey something through these presences. Let's move to the next slide. Well, I called it as an act of daring. Eliot dared to write differently. I guess this poem was written around 1910 and published in 1917, I guess. But anyway, he wrote this poem with total indifference to the, the usual form you might have enjoyed, say, from the Elizabethan period or neoclassical or the Romantic period or even the Victorian period. So the poet dares to be different in terms of content, in terms of form. So we'll talk about the way he makes a difference. But my contention is a poem is always an act of daring. And there are many examples of people who dare to write differently. I find that one such person is John Donne, I guess. Like his poem, Valediction Forbidding Mourning. So what do we learn from these? That Eliot is the Pidamahan of modernism. And modernism believes in compression. There's nothing elaborate or descriptive about it. But Donne has found it earlier in poems like Sunrising, where he dares to call the sun as busy old fool, a saucy pedantic wretch. And he says, I can eclipse you. I can cloud you with a wink. When I wink, for that split second, you're gone. You disappear from my vision. I can do that. But that second, then I don't see my beloved. That is why I don't do that. This is an act of daring. Who would do that around the Elizabethan period? And also, when the poet takes leave of his wife, Anne Donne, and he was on his way to France, he writes this poem, Valediction. Okay, I'm bidding farewell to you, but you shouldn't cry. It's valediction marked by, not marked by mourning as normally it happens. You cry, you shed a few tears, and you feel the absence of your beloved. But Donne is very clear. Valediction is marked by forbidding mourning. So this is just an early example of daring. That you dare to be different. And I don't want to be conventional. I don't want to be, soak my words in sentiments. I will approach it using logic. I will present arguments in a love poem. And you find that in the Romantics, they also dare to be different. The Romantics revolted against the staid, stern restrictions of an earlier period, like the neoclassical. You'll find that in every language, in every literature. And you have such examples like Bharati, when he wrote poetry in a very new vein, that Sol Budidu, Porul Budidu, Suvai Budidu, Jodi Mikka Navakavidai. So he's totally departed from the earlier tradition, 19th century tradition, and wrote about his nation, his love for the language, his love for freedom and liberty, and he used language differently. So he was one of the early examples of revolt in the 20th century in Tamil literature. So when you take a poem like the love song, I take the poem, I hold it like a slide against my eyes on the recommendation of the American poet Billy Collins. You look at the poem and you look at the you look at the beginning, the middle, the end, and you find that this poem is not linear like a romantic poem or earlier poems in English. That it doesn't begin in the morning and proceeds through the noon or afternoon, the evening, and then come back to the morning. A kind of rondo structure you will find in like Wordsworth's poems, like Tintin Abbey. This is totally different.
My camera's on.
I can't make out anything from the poem. It's totally disjointed. No, nothing linear about the poem, and I'm shocked. Then I read the poem aloud, the sound's different. The musicality is totally different. And I'm not able to make out anything from the poem. It's I don't know where the poet leads me to. And then I come to the end, and Billy Collins recommends that you pass through certain corridors, some hallways, and then you finally come to a close. It makes sense. So it's our duty to find out whether there is any sense in this poem, because in form, in content, totally different from the poems we have read from the earlier period. So Eliot's The Love Song of Alfred J. Prufrock is a classic example of revolting against the way the poem was written in the earlier sagas, eras. Oh, let me move to the next slide. Some people say that human nature changed around 1910. Some of you might have read W.B. Yeats's poem, The Second Coming, where the poet talks about the center cannot hold. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. So the 20th century is marked by, well, there is an expansion of the British Empire, and therefore they needed more people to work. So you have the emergence of a middle class. The cities are emerging, and you have sections of the city where the rich live, and then you have sections where the poor live. So there is a new world was emerging around the 20th century, and there is no order, the kind of order you found in the earlier eras. And the earlier eras reflected the milieu the poets lived. So Eliot belongs to the first half of the 20th century, which is marked by 2 world wars, depression, economic depression, and therefore it's right on our part to expect a poet to write in a proper form, perhaps writing a sonnet. Who will write a sonnet in the 20th century except perhaps Robert Frost? whose first volume in 1911 contained some stanzas or some sonnets, which of course were experiments. But apart from Prose, all the other poets like Yeats and especially Eliot, they created new, let's call it a formless form. We had to create the form. As we created meaning for the images poem from Pound, each reader has to create his own vision, his own lessons from the poem. And I'm struck by the title, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. How can you have a hero with a name like Prufrock with an initial, J. Alfred Prufrock? And how can he be capable of a love song? So he inspired Eliot to choose a totally different title, something you laugh at. But Eliot says he was struck by the title of a Kipling poem, The Love Song of Hardayal. Hardayal is an North Indian name, and he stuck to it. And deliberately he keeps, see, from the beginning to the end, you'll find that, okay, the stanzaic divisions are irregular. The music is different. The rhyme scheme is, there is no harmony in that. He doesn't seem to follow a certain given established pattern. And his similes, his images are very unfamiliar. So all these are features of a poem created in a world where there was no order, where there was a lot of confusion. So the poem can only reflect what was happening outside in the world. And that is why you have a title like The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Well, of course, it must have been inspired by some shop front in St. Louis, Missouri, whatever. Let's go to the poem. There is an epigraph from Dante's Inferno. There is a conversation between Dante and one of the characters condemned in hell. He was called the Count Guido di Montefeltro, and he's in hell, punished for the crimes he had committed when he was in the earth. So Dante engages him in a conversation, and Guido responds like this: if I thought that my reply would be to one who would ever return to the world, you are in hell, you will never be able to return to the earth, and therefore I will talk to you. This flame would stay without further movement. The movement is at the tip when Guido talks. So he was sure that the visitor, Dante, is not going to return. Now we've got to make that connection. The poem. What has got Guido di Montefeltro to do with the poem? And the poet prefixes it as an epigraph. So you have to talk to someone who won't talk about it to others. So that means a listener is ruled out. I have to talk within myself. I got to speak, and I hear the speaker and the listener perhaps are inside or in me. It is possible. Because what I I got something to say. I have so many suppressed emotions, but I can't share it with others. But I'm sharing it with you. There is a listener. But who is the listener? We'll find out. We'll find out. So when you look at the roadmap of the poem, it begins with an epigraph, which is kind of unusual. We also have talked about the contradistinctive signals in the title. Because the love song, as you read the poem, is not romantic like the love songs you might have read, let's say, Shakespeare's sonnets. Then another feature we find in the poem, there is I, there is you, and there is we. Let us go then, you and I. That's the first line. So let us, you and I. Go then, you and I. Till the end, you don't know who is this you. We don't know, you and I. There are two persons. There is a speaker and there is a listener. Well, then you think, this is a dramatic monologue. In a dramatic monologue, there is a speaker, there is a listener. You bring to your mind one of the great dramatic monologues of Robert Browning, My Last Duchess. So there is the Duke of Ferrara, and there is a visitor from some rich count whose daughter the speaker wants to marry, the Duke of Ferrara. So he is taking him through the palace, and he is showing his wife's painting, and you know the poem. So there is a speaker and there is a listener, but the listener is suppressed. We know there is a listener. We know he is the messenger from the count, but he doesn't speak. But we are aware of the fact that there are two persons, the speaker and the listener. But when we come to a poem like Prufrock, okay, there is a speaker. Let us go then, you and I. Fine. Is the speaker Eliot? We don't know. And who is the listener? Is he a friend of Eliot? We don't know. But you have these pronouns. Sounds very distant, very impersonal. I, you, we. So this dialogue is taking place inside. That is why some people call it as an interior monologue. Lafforgue, a French poet, has initiated that interior monologue that takes place inside you. Maybe it is an interior monologue, but it's classified as a dramatic monologue, but it's totally different from Browning. And then you look at you look for stanza division. You'll find in Keats' Ode to Autumn or Shelley's Ode to the West Wind, there is a certain symmetry, like 5 sonnets making up the 5 stanzas in Shelley's Ode to the West Wind. And in Keats, of course, in some odes you may have 3 or you may have 4 or 5, but a certain number of lines will be present in each stanza. There is something, some order about the division of stanzas. But you don't find that. You find the lines irregular. You have a 2-line paragraph. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. And that constitutes one stanza. And it's stuck between 2 long passages. Let us go then, you and I, and also the evening, the smoggy evening, which he describes. So we are struck by the absence of pattern. We are also impressed by factors like similes. For example, the first 3 lines. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. I was reading in one book, it said they were like, the 3 lines were like bullet shots. And the whole world was astonished by the audacious attempt, the audacious simile. It's a romantic episode. You're going to sing your love song. You're going to be with your beloved, and you want to meet her in the evening, like in a beauteous evening, calm and free, like you'll find in Wordsworth. But here, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient, etherized. That rings a bell. Ether. Well, it makes you go unconscious when you are on the surgical table, perhaps, and ether is kind of formless, vaporized. Etherized upon a table, that means you're forced to remain flat on the table, unconscious. But is that the way you want to describe a romantic evening? So there is a certain, this is what that shocked the world. How can you have a romantic outing, a date, an evening, which you compare it to a patient under the influence of ether on a table? So the poem is loaded with such shocking comparisons. And we have the images, like, well, for instance, the fog and the cat, a fog-like cat, which envelops the surroundings. And there is a line which says I had to go and attend a party where the questions were, placed on a plate. They'd lift and drop a question on your plate. So plate is an image of a social evening. So we understand, who is this guy? So he's a socialite. He's not a poor guy. Even though in the opening stanza, he wants to go through that you and I shall walk through half-deserted streets, perhaps stay in one-night cheap hotels, and we'll go through streets that follow like a tedious argument. So there is something shocking about the persona. On the one hand, he goes to party, he attends social outings, where he has to face questions from others. The question that dropped on the plate, as he uses the image of the plate, we understand, yes, this is a social occasion. But is he able to handle that social occasion? He's not able to, perhaps. That is why you go back to the first answer. Oh, this guy wants to go through streets which are shady, which are not in the best part of the city. So there is something wrong with this persona, with this character, perhaps. But all this there's a reaction give to a word here, an image there, a simile here. And that, I think, is something very unique about this poem. Then you have the persona is so shrinks himself, is not able to handle the social evenings in a hotel or an exclusive club. So he shrinks and he feels, I'm like an insect pinned on the wall, wriggling in pain. So that is So that is the image of an insect, maybe a cockroach. And then there is a crab scuttling at the bottom of the sea, across the floor. And he uses words like ragged claws. And there is a description. He looks at the women in the club. He doesn't have the guts to look at them in the eyes, but he talks about the arms. So there's something fragmented about from those descriptions. So fragment is an interesting word. The poem is packed with fragmented paragraphs or stanzas of varying lengths. The character also is fragmented. He hears so many voices perhaps inside of him. When you look at the wasteland, you hear so many voices. As a reader, you undertake a journey across the world, across the wasteland, and you keep hearing voices from the Elizabethan period, perhaps from the Greek period, the Roman period, or from a contemporary setting. So you are caught. You're caught. You hear so many varying sounds. All this you deduce from the way Eliot arranges, not arrangement deliberately, but then they are fixed in the paragraphs, in the stanzas, fragmented paragraphs. I can't look at the women in their eyes because I'm timid. Okay, so there is that description. He looks at the arms. Inference, he doesn't look at the women in the eyes. And further inference, oh, he is not bold. He is timid. This is how you want to deduce, if you call it, meaning from the poem. And there is another image. Oh, I grow old, and I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Rolled up trousers. Fashionable, perhaps in 1910, around that period. So the middle-aged, a guy who cannot make moves, who cannot talk to women, who doesn't have the courage, who is timid, he, let's put an end to that kind of part in my life. I'm going to be fashionable. I'm going to wear those trousers. So the trouser is a symbol of contemporary fashion, but he won't do that because he doesn't have the courage. And even at the end, you have the image of mermaids. Mermaids come up for surface, and then they go down. They hear human voices, and they go down. They're always, drowned under the sea, under the surface, always submerged. And they sing among themselves, as the poet says towards the close. And we got info. And the protagonist says, they won't sing to me, but they will sing to each other. So he is left out. Well, that is a conclusion I draw from that. And also, the poet is famous for bringing quotations from other works. You have got quotation from Andrew Marvell's His Coy Mistress. You have got quotations from the Bible. You have quotations from other works, as you'll find in Wasteland. So these quotes are juxtaposed with certain actions in the course of the poem. And we had to make a relationship, as we did with Ezra Pound. 2 lines, you got to make the connection. So you look at an image, you come across a quotation, and you got to make the connection between the quotation and the persona. And there are also allusions. Like, for instance, in the second stanza was Suddenly you're taken unaware. Let us go then, you and I. And then the person, and then you have the line. Don't ask me that overwhelming question. Let's go on a journey which will lead us to an overwhelming question. What is that overwhelming question? We don't know. But don't ask me. Let's go and make our visit. But they never make that visit. But immediately, this stanza is followed by something that doesn't have any connection, seemingly, in the room, perhaps in the club. The women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. Well, what kind of women are they who come and go with ease, so comfortable with themselves, so much at ease in the surrounds of the club or a hotel? And what do they talk about? They talk about high topics like Michelangelo, the great painter, sculptor. So you are talking about women talking of Michelangelo. Now, from these two lines, I have to deduce the characteristics of the protagonist, the traits of his character. And that is interesting. In Shakespeare, for instance, in the opening scene, like in Antony and Cleopatra, two people will be talking about Antony and Cleopatra. So from then we conclude, oh, so this is how we are introduced to Antony and Cleopatra. But here, the women talking about Michelangelo, from there, the description, we understand the character of the protagonist. We could see the tension. We can understand this guy cannot relate to such women. So it's a deliberate intrusion, and we are supposed to draw something from that intrusion. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. And you have allusions to Lazarus, to John the Baptist. These are all stories. But then I feel I'm a victim. And you're the story of King Herod presenting the head of John the Baptist to Salome the dancer. But instantly what happens is, look, they're all great people. Don't compare me with them. I don't deserve it. So I think the poet suddenly becomes, the character becomes diffident. I have given on the slide objective correlative. So let's devise. The writers used to evoke a specific emotional response in readers. That is why you have in the opening the description of the evening, like a patient etherized upon the table. There are also other things which I will mention, like change of tense, present tense, past tense, future, conditional tense, and of course the music you'll find throughout the poem. And that takes us to the next stanza, the overwhelming question. We don't know. The question is not, you don't find that question anywhere in the poem. You only have the overwhelming question. And you make your own conjectures. In the context of the poem, perhaps this is a proposal, perhaps, or an innocuous invitation. Let's go for coffee. Let's go for dinner. But they are not overwhelming questions. But to the protagonist, it is an overwhelming question. Kind of question that shakes up your soul. There's got tremendous consequences. But then the overwhelming question could be as straight and as ordinary as let's go for coffee. But maybe at the end of the poem, we'll find out maybe this is the overwhelming question, but the question is central to the poem. The overwhelming question is a revelation. The protagonist takes the other one. Let's go then, you and I. But don't ask me the overwhelming question. But let's make the visit. But does he make the visit? No. He doesn't make the visit. He dilly-dallies. He is a procrastinator. So he talks about, oh, that'll be time. But then can I ask that question? And that is why, do I dare disturb the universe? And then he tells us, oh, I know these people, how they judge me. So you find a stanza where how he is looked upon by the women. And there is a stanza where he talks about how he finds them. And you'll find how in one stanza he decides, look, I'm afraid. That's a stanza that ends with that. In short, I was afraid. Fear. The fear of making his presence in public. The fear of speaking. The fear of revealing his intent to the digital generation of today. This doesn't make any sense. How can someone be so diffident? How can someone be so timid? But that is what the protagonist is. He is, let's see, the protagonist. He is a socialite. Yes, he comes from the upper class society, fine. But he is timid. Though he comes from an upper class society, there is something wrong with his personality. That is why he wants to visit those shady areas of the city. But he is timid. He can't see the women in the eyes. He is so self-conscious. I'm like an insect wriggling upon a wall. I'm pinned on the wall. He has sufficient sexual desire, but he doesn't have that sufficient will for execution. That is his problem. Sufficient desire, but insufficient or total absence of will to execute. And the protagonist loves wandering aimlessly through those shady streets of Boston. Maybe he is depraved. There's something depraved about his persona. And he is like Hamlet. In fact, he makes that reference. I'm not a Prince Hamlet. I'm only one of those that swells up progress. Just one of those insignificant beings, characters who will be part of a big procession. Diffident. I'm not Prince Hamlet. Maybe I'm the fool. But then the fool isn't the Elizabethan drama, is the jester. But you find Falstaff could be the fool, but then he is very intelligent. But am I intelligent like Falstaff? No. So my problem is how relevant the protagonist in the present day world. Can you find a person like the protagonist in the like Prufrock, that the reader has to ask himself. Not necessarily romantic settings, but in other settings of life. Am I timid? Can I speak in public? Can I move with others? Am I a good conversationalist? Can I relate to people who I have never met before? These are all troubling questions that young people or of different ages face. So the persona, the description of the protagonist could be relevant even today. So that you have to ask yourself, timid, diffident, unable to express oneself, and procrastinating, not being capable. I'm capable of a dream, I'm capable of imagination, but I can't execute it. I know this is the moment, but I will not surrender myself to that moment. To meet the woman, make the proposal, take her for dinner, maybe. But then that is taking your desire to action, to its logical conclusion, but you are not capable of. This far and no further. That's your problem. We are not. I'm not here to take you through line by line. That's not my intention. I hear these voices in the poem, then I draw my own conclusions. And perhaps a strategy for enjoying this poem will be to read the poem. Let me give an example. We got time for that. There is a stanza which I will read very fast. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the poles that stand in the drains, let fall upon his back the soup that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. We got to understand the music of each line. Don't look for traditional rhyme schemes or schemes which produce certain kind of music. But Eliot is a genius. He devises he's his own orchestra. He devises a certain music, and you will understand that only when you read the poem aloud. But there is a stanza where I will have to slow down. And that is why the strategy is the reading strategy. Some passages I may be fast. The pace will be quicker, faster. But there are certain passages where I slow down, and that makes sense to me. For example, this is a stanza where you find the conditional tenses. And would it have been worth it after all? Would it have been worthwhile after the sunset and the dooryards and the sprinkled streets, after the novels, after the teacups, after the skirts that trail along the floor, and this and so much more? It's impossible to say just what I mean. But as if a magic lantern threw the nerves in patterns on a screen, would it have been worthwhile if one setting a pillow or throwing off a shawl and turning toward the window should say, that is not it at all. That is not what I meant at all. So you got to vary the pace. So when you read the poem aloud, perhaps you get the essence of the poem. It's a strategy the teacher or the student can adopt to understand a tough a poem of disjuncture, like a love song. The overwhelming question at the end. Perhaps the poet was inspired by the story of the death of King Arthur, written by Mallory, one of the favorite works of Eliot, as he says, where the Knights of the Round Table, they embark on a quest after the Holy Grail, and you can reach your goal provided you're able to ask the right questions. That's the story. So what ails thee, king? From that work, Death of Arthur. That's a question the protagonist perhaps asks himself, that overwhelming question, what's the problem with me? But he is not able to find an answer. He is not interested in an answer. He is not willing to surrender himself to a moment where he gets an answer, a problem, a solution to his problems. He loves asking that question, that overwhelming question. We have to deduce that question, infer from a reading of the poem, but the protagonist is not. So that is something, we can't help it. In fact, the publisher, Harriet, when Pound took it to the publisher was not happy because the end of the poem, the mermaid's drown. In a sense, the protagonist has come out with whatever that is raging within his tortured self, but he is not going to come out totally and try to find a solution. Like the mermaids, he will go down back into the floors of the sea. That's where they live. So the protagonist is happy. I will live within myself, within my own tortured self. But the question anyway is asked, what's wrong with me? What's the problem? What's wrong with the life I lead? What ails the king? That question I will ask myself. But I don't deserve an answer. So there is a kind of person you have, the tortured, divided, split self of Prufrock, whose love song can only be split, divided. It's not romantic at all. It doesn't make any sense. But the poem succeeds in placing before you a person with problems. And that is, don't ask me what are the takeaways from the poem. You have to find, each one will have different takeaways. Perhaps for me, it's a very interesting poem in the sense that am I Prufrock? Do I have some of the traits of Prufrock? But unlike Prufrock, I will find a solution. I will address the questions. But there are readers, some readers, yeah, it's me. Prufrock is me, but I like Prufrock. I will remain Prufrock. That is also possible. That is why that's how I look at a poem like the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Well, Rohan, it's 8 o'clock. You kept the time. There will be time for questions, like Prufrock would have said. Back to Rohan Sabarimatu. Back to the coordinator.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And my dear participants, both students, well-wishers, and those who are ardent fan of Professor, the floor is open to you for questions, comments, and anything that you prefer.
What are the overwhelming questions from the audience?
Dr. Rohan, can I respond?
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
Raja from American College, a grand student of Dr. Nedumaran sir. It's not a question because I belongs to economics discipline, but I love his the way in which he is presenting English and literature to the audience. I have only one simple clarifications from Professor Nedumaran sir.
Yes, Dr. Mudaraj.
Yeah. Can you suggest some kind of skill set to the new readers of literature, particularly in the new generations who are reading literature in modern times? What kind of skill set they must possess to equip themselves to share to the global level of their own understanding? Because after hearing and listening your valuable presentation, I wonder and I have envy with your presentation because more poetic, more music based, more authentic. So that kind of confidence I'm able to get. Do you have any suggestions to the modern readers, particularly young readers of literature or drama or anything, sir? Please, sir.
No, that's right.
I'm sorry for asking irrelevant question to you. Please.
No. Professor, it's a very good question because I grew up in an age where there was not much technology, where a tape recorder was a luxury. I remember playing a tape by one of the great actors, Alec Guinness, reading Wasteland aloud. It was recorded, and I played it to my students. For me, it was a technological marvel. But the generation you are talking about, the digital generation, they have access to YouTube. YouTube may be an ocean of nonsense, but there are certain areas. For example, I want to know about this poem. I want to listen to a native speaker reading the poem. You go to YouTube.
Yeah.
You type a love song of J. Alfred, Prufrock, and then you will get like great actors like Jeremy Irons. And Jeremy Irons gave a speech on how to read a poem. And there are other stage actors who talk about their skills in acting and how they relate themselves to Shakespeare. So my advice to the present generation, make use of the technology you have, like in your cell phone. You don't have to have a laptop. So if you can listen to the poem, and I think a poem is communicated long before it is understood. You don't have to wait for writing a scholarly paper on the poem. You read the poem, you listen to the poem, you understand at least 50%, maybe 25%. Then you've got the print media. Well, you don't have to buy books. You can go to Google and can download. See, the technology is so marvelous. But do you have the time, the willingness to use that listening skill? You're talking about a skill set.
Yeah.
I think passion, that's not a skill. Passion is an emotion. Munni mundi elum oru veri. That you and I cannot teach in a class. You can teach well, and they must be inspired. But you are teaching out of passion. The student should have the same passion to go after you, to go after the author, to understand Eliot or understand economics or whatever. Passion and the skills like listening, reading, and use your technology. I think that will be the advice you will give. And you are very good at technology. I have never seen a teacher who uses all the available sources, avenues like WhatsApp or Instagram. What else is left? There is nothing left for Professor Mutharaj. He will exploit all these avenues of technology.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thanks for blessing, sir.
You are an example for the digital generation. You are a perfect example of a teacher who uses technology to be successful in the classroom.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
You are the question, you are the answer, Professor.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
No problem. Yes. That was an overwhelming question, definitely.
Dhanraj, sir, we would love to listen to you.
Yeah. Sir, good evening, sir. I was your student in 1969. It's almost more than 50 years.
Wow.
I vividly,
Which year
Delhi.
again?
68, 69. PUC, I was with you.
Wow, that I was ridiculously young, lean, and hungry looking. 68.
And angry and very, very agile, walking tall. And I vividly remember at that time the Agni Pravesam was the hot topic. And we remember how you explained that story in Tamil and everything. And we used to form a fan group of you. I moved to Delhi, sir. I worked for Government of India.
Wow.
Then I moved to WHO. Now currently I am working for UN.
Wow.
And I am in the alumni group. I saw this and I was very keen to listen to you. I am from Tenur, sir. Tenur.
Oh, that's my father's hometown.
Yes. Your relative Santanam and other people, they
Yes. I come from
Tenur. Tenur, sir. So
it's a small world.
Yeah. So I saw that your name, then I got your number. I did not want to disturb you, but I thought better I first listen to you, then I will come back to you, sir. Thank you very much. If you happen to come to Delhi, please do inform me, sir. I will be very pleased to.
Thank you. I got a call from a person from 68 when we had the alumni gathering a year ago. And you're the second person from the same batch, 68. And remember me, it's like, how many years? 32 plus 25. It's like 60 years, am I right?
Yes.
Is my calculation correct? This is wonderful. Thank you, Rohan. Rohan, it's a timeless moment. What else can I say?
Welcome, sir.
It's a timeless moment.
It was nice to have seen you, sir, and listen to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes, others? Chamit, Krishanta?
Yes, sir, am I audible?
Yeah, you are very much.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. So I have a small question to ask. This poem seems to be influenced by metaphysical poetry. So can you comment on this?
I won't say totally influenced. I was in one of the books I learned that he was influenced by the French Imagist poets like Laforgue. And he has written an article on metaphysical poets, the poet himself. I think the metaphysical poets were ignored for a long time in the Romantic period or in the Victorian period. And I think it was Eliot who kind of resurrected them, restored them to their glory. I think what is the similarity is around the Elizabethan period, like 16th or 17th centuries, to be cold, logical, using reason in love poems was definitely shocking to the people who read the poetry of Donne. Because John Donne departed from the Elizabethan highways, very similar to what Eliot had done at the turn of the 20th century, that he departed from the routes the Victorians and the Romantics had taken and shocked the world with the kind of poetry which is very difficult for people to understand. It doesn't have the elements of the so-called traditional poetry with set structure, order, or rhyme scheme. So there are similarities with the metaphysicals, because the metaphysicals were dependent on the use of logic, or kind of argumentative, trying to prove what they are saying. Their love poems were not definitely like Shakespeare's or Spencer's. To do that in that period definitely was radical, very similar to what Eliot had done at the turn of the 20th century. I won't say directly influenced, but the elements, how Eliot could relate himself to the poets of the metaphysical period. Hope I have answered your question.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, just I want to have a small clarity, sir. Sir, what exactly do we mean by disassociational sensibility, sir?
Dissociation of sensibility. Or
Definitely.
Yeah. That's right. Heart, the head, they play a role when you for a creative person, right? Because you speak from the heart, you write from the heart. Then the head, which is the storehouse of logic, they don't play. It doesn't play a role when you're trying to be creative or write a poem. The kind of sensibility you require, a poem could be very sentimental, appealing to the heart, where you try to move away from that kind of approach, and you become impersonal. You distance yourself from the situation. I think that is why you're talking about poetry of disjuncture. You don't find that in Wordsworth or Keats, because they are very much rooted in the emotions the setting creates in them. But here, the total distancing, we can call it cold-blooded, because that is what requires to understand the environment these poets lived in. Eliot also talks about, I remember the word impersonality. Poetry is not an effusion of emotions. It is moving away from emotions. You don't move like romantic poets from the personal to the universal. The personal is not present in a poem like the one we did just now, the love song. But that is a kind of tendency Eliot brought into the world of poetry. That is why his influence was so strong, at least for 3 decades, the 10s, the 20s, and the 30s. Nobody could escape the impersonality, the dissociation of senses or sensibilities. Be It's not rude, but it's being called a true reflection of the world around. That's what comes to my mind from your question.
Thank you, sir.
No problem.
I would like to invite Mary Gabriel, Professor Mary Gabriel. You have typed the question. Can you ask, please?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Professor Nedumaran.
Good evening.
Thank you for that riveting session. Sir, you have been talking about passion a little while ago, and then you also spoke about sensibility, dissociation, the heart and the head and all that.
Yeah.
I'm just curious to know your opinion on digital poetry, where we're talking about programming softwares to generate poetry. And then you see writers coming out in open forum telling that they have used AI to write parts of their fiction and all that. So what's your take on that, sir? As a person with so much of command over poetry, how do you look at it, and how do you see the future of poetry, sir, with the man-machine interface?
The
Thank you.
machine can never be human. So whatever the machine produces, there is nothing human about it. For me, every age had its own machine to support human beings. It could be a pencil, it could be Eritani, it could be a typewriter, it could be a computer. So now you got AI. It's an advanced level in technology. But how can it replace a human being? All that is human. It's, personally, AI should help me. Like, for instance, you have in your cell phone dictionary or pronunciation. Okay, you type the word and you listen to the pronunciation, you get the meaning. That is very handy. Can't carry the Oxford Dictionary wherever you go, but you have a cell phone. So I love the technology. I love that technology that is bringing me to you through a screen. That is fine. But the laptop cannot replace me. Oh yes, you can feed into the software all the gimmicks and it will produce a poem. People will say that, you give it to a judge and the judge might think it's written by a human being. That is fine. But if the machine replaces the human beings, like in creativity, I think that'll be as shocking as the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Yeah, I really shudder. I'm happy to have been born into a very simple world where people felt a few emotions and wrote poetry out of emotions. That was I'm happy with that world. But I'm not sure about the next 50 years. That's for the next generation. They have to make a decision. So there can't be one answer for this. This is my reflection, my response to machines. It's a tool. A tool cannot replace a heart.
That's so comforting, sir. Thank you.
Any more questions?
It's okay. It's dinner time, I guess.
Yeah.
I want to
Shall
thank
we
you.
wind up then?
This is it's a great moment, and want to thank Rohan for bringing us together and try to grapple with a very tough poet like
Yes, sir.
like Eliot.
But we are grateful to you, sir. And now,
Oh.
Shanta, can you deliver the formal word of thanks?
Okay, sir. So, good evening, everyone. It gives me immense pleasure to propose the vote of thanks for this enlightening session on T.S. Eliot's poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. First and foremost, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to our distinguished resource person, Professor R. Nedumaran, former head of PG Department of English at the American College, Madurai, India. So your insightful analysis of T.S. Eliot's masterpiece has broadened our understanding of this modernist poetry, its daring themes and its resonance with contemporary audiences. And I want to thank you again for your valuable contribution to our learning process. And I would like to thank Dr. Jayesh Rohan Savrimuthu, Senior Lecturer, Department of Languages and Communication Studies, Eastern University, Sri Lanka, for organizing this event and providing us with this wonderful opportunity to learn. And also, I want to thank Dr. Niruba Jayasundara, Senior Lecturer in Linguistics. Ma'am, your participation always very big help to us, and you always enlighten our way to learn. And last but not least, I thank all the participants for joining us and actively engaged in this session. Your enthusiasm and questions enriched the discussion and made this session even more meaningful. Once again, thank you all for making this event a great success. Wishing you all a pleasant evening ahead. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Hoping to see you soon, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Dhanraj. Thank you, Rohan.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
No problem.
It's just been a real wonderful session. And I know that you have been loved by most of our students. So welcome to Sri Lanka.
Someday, yes.
Thank you, sir.
Someday. It's not too far. Yeah. You live with each other.
Sure, sir.
So, we'll see you soon.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you all. Thank you all.